Day 4 of 31 Days of Comics asks us for a great love story. And I know that at least some of you are expecting me to now start with questions like, what is love? Is it a figment of our imaginations, or is it something that happens naturally? Is it completely subjective, or is there some universality to it? Sort of highlighting the futility of trying to put into language such complex and abstract emotions. At the same time, the apparent absurdity of talking about love hasn't stopped us from attempting it in storytelling, because storytelling is the perfect way to try and talk about something that apparently infects or has the potential to infect every human being, but is so difficult or impossible to discuss in the abstract. So that's the part I really want to focus on. Not so much about how many types of love are there or what love means to people, but focus more on what makes something a love story and what makes something a great love story. I think most, if not all of us, will agree that although romantic love seems to be the dominant thing that comes to people's mind when we say love, love can mean many other things aside from romantic or sexual love. But when we get to the term love story, over there, I think it is overwhelmingly romantic love that seems to be the subject of these stories. Now, I'm not saying that all love stories are romantic love stories. I just think that a love story is different from a book about love. A book about love would be a much wider range, at least in my brain, than a love story. And I think the reason behind this might be the fact that love stories are about at least two characters. A single person's love for somebody or something is very common, but even if you have a prince who goes on a quest to marry a princess that he's in love with, if the princess doesn't have much of a role in it, it doesn't really strike us so much as a love story as it strikes us as a quest story. This, I think, applies to a lot of those other things that we may apply love for. There might be love for one's country, but would I really take a patriotic story about one person's love for their country and classify it as a love story? And maybe your reply to that would be, yes, absolutely, that would be a love story. But I have to be honest, that is not the way I look at the term love story. And I think even in a romantic context, if we get a single person's point of view only, it makes it difficult to think of it as a love story. Now, I'm not saying that a love story has to be about requited love, like the love has to be returned or reciprocated. Instead, I think for something to be a love story, the potential has to exist for the love to be reciprocated. So Batman's love for Gotham would only truly become a love story for me if there is a way of representing, either physically or metaphorically, Gotham's ability to love back. And while those kind of things are possible, most of the time the need for at least one more character and that potential for love to flow both ways, those are the kind of necessary things to storytelling that make love stories lean towards romantic love more often than not. Of course, that's just my musings on the matter, mainly to narrow down where my pick is going to land. But even within romantic love, there are so many different types of love stories. You may have the fairy tale happily ever after. You've got tragedies along the lines of star-crossed lovers who can never be together. You can have a story about the beginnings and the awakenings of love, or a more worn and faded and twilight type of love. It could be optimistic and bright-eyed. It could be a sorrowful elegy. To me, a great love story makes the love obvious. You can see why it exists. You can see why it blossoms. You can also see why it's threatened. In great love stories, you root for the love, not because you're supposed to, but because the work earns it. The making of the love real for the reader is the toughest part. And many comics have successfully pulled off that balance of two complete whole characters whose attraction and the reasons for those attractions to each other are completely visible, making us, the readers, a sort of cheering squad against the difficulties that they may face. And no comic I can think of does it as well as The Prince and the Dressmaker, written and illustrated by Jen Wang. The Prince and the Dressmaker definitely has a fairy tale feel and quality to it, resembling most of all Cinderella, but its modern, witty, and charming take on this magic-less fairy tale feels unique and fresh. Both the titular characters, the Prince and the Dressmaker, are wonderful, warm characters who are created completely and whose dynamic immediately hooks us. Although the plot seems to move in a traditional fairy fairy tale structure, it is actually fueled completely by the characters and the decisions they make, which are extensions of who they are as people. Wonderfully written and illustrated, this book takes on every formula you have in fairy tales and turns them on their head. The familiar things, the royalty and class differences, duty and your position, all of those elements are given this effortless modern sheen in this story of two people finding each other, needing each other, and finding in each other the activation of new selves, creating that sort of crowd-pleasing, rousing, stand-up and cheer feeling within the audience. And this is a love story on so many levels. Not only is there the romance between the central characters, but there's also the love of self and the confidence and the notions of identity that are so needed by us. There's love of family and community and support, and the challenges and obstacles faced are never cheap manipulations. They always seem like real consequences and real pressures, making the choices of our characters difficult and therefore truly meaningful. Rather than live up to fairy tale notions of love, which just happen because they're supposed to happen and people do things because they're supposed to do things, The Prince and the Dressmaker focuses instead completely on its characters, on their desires and wants, and how they enable each other's journey and together achieve the things that by themselves they couldn't have. And while it is, spoiler alert, a happy ending fairy tale, that happy ending isn't created out of magic and wish fulfillment. And the fact that the ending is driven completely by the love that fuels these characters makes it the best kind of optimistic, crowd-pleasing storytelling. There is, of course, an idealism to it, but I would say that love itself is an ideal concept, and finding the reality is always going to be the struggle. It is in the discovery, the nurturing, the protection, and the blossoming that makes for the beauty of the greatest love stories. So those are my brief thoughts on love stories and Jen Wang's The Prince and the Dressmaker. Now it's your turn. In the comments below, let me have your pick for a great comics love story. Day 5 will be coming soon. In the meantime, if you haven't seen the previous episodes of 31 Days of Comics, check out this playlist over here. This has been For the Love of Comics, playing 31 Days of Comics, and I'll see you at the next video.